Hi, me again. Time for us to talk about innovation. So, first of all, what is it? A lot of people misunderstand innovation. For me, it's one of two things. Either we found a much better way of doing business. We might call it business process redesign, but I like to think of it as business process re-engineering. How can we get from A to B in half the time? How can we find a way of delivering that thing you've just ordered on Amazon the next day? Think about the logistics of that, by the way. I ordered a book yesterday at 3 o'clock. It was at my door at 9:45 the next morning. How do they do that? They innovated around every single business process along the way. I'm a publisher. I publish books. How do we do it? We create the resource, which is what takes the most time. We have some really good editors and graphic designers. And what used to take a year from the completion of a manuscript to publishing in the market now takes 2 weeks, and we print on demand or we deliver through an ebook platform. That's a whole way of reimagining business processes from beginning to end. So that's one kind of innovation, reimagining the way we do the work. The other one is to create new products or new services that get to market, grow in the market, and stay there. So I don't think an innovation is a product that gets to market that nobody wants to buy. That's just daft. A really powerful innovation is a thing that changes the way we understand what a product is, how it works, how it's positioned in the market. My favorite example is James Dyson, who invented the Dyson vacuum cleaner. He took over 1,300 prototypes, found one that works, and within 4 years took 34% of the vacuum cleaner market with his new design. He nearly went bankrupt twice, and he had 5 mortgages on his house to make that possible. He's now one of the richest people in the UK. Actually, he lives in Singapore now. So, what are these two kinds of innovation? Business process redesign, new products that get to and stay in the market. What do these two things take? What do they take? One of them is to secure gains in productivity. That's one of the things that comes from this work. New products getting and staying in the market means the market grows and changes. New uses for existing products. So there's a lovely story of the guy who bought Ronson, the razor company, electric razor company, using his electric razor one day to remove some burrs from his suit jacket, suddenly realizing I could use this same technology with a slightly different mesh on the front of it to have a clothes shaver. We have 3 in this house. Don't ask me why, but we do have lots of them. And he got like 15% of his business came from that version of the same product. So the same product used differently for a different application. We call that adopt, adapt. Most innovation is like that. So we'll come back to that. So what's some examples of great innovation that we can see or hear about? Well, one of them is reasonably obvious. The Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine is actually a new way of delivering vaccines to people. It uses a different technology from normal vaccines. It uses a way of changing the way our DNA works, our genomes work inside the body, so that the body can build better defenses, which strengthens the immune system. And it essentially is a way of using recombinant DNA to shift the way our own body mechanisms work. Very powerful. And it's a watershed moment in vaccine technologies. So that's one thing. Another example is the use of blockchain technologies for financial transactions. First company in Canada, by the way, to do that was the Alberta Treasury Branches, ATB, who were the first to use blockchain transactions. What does this mean? Well, I have money in the UK. If I move that money to Scotiabank, it takes 10 to 15 days for that money to be formally available to me in my bank account. If the bank used blockchain technology, it would be available to me instantly because the money is verifiable at both ends of that transaction instantaneously. Another example is the use of carbon captured from the atmosphere. So there's a thing called the Carbon X Prize. It's a $20 million prize funded by the X Prize Foundation and COSIA, the Combined Oil Sands Innovation Group here in Alberta, and they put up $20 million for smart uses of CO2. One of them, which I really quite like, is a company in Calgary who's making vodka from CO2 emissions. Another example is Google DeepMinds and the use of AI. Now, Google DeepMinds is a machine intelligent learning engine that is capable of learning very quickly. And at the Moorfields Hospital in London, which is one of the world's leading eye hospitals, Google DeepMinds has replaced people for doing diagnostics on eye disease. IBM Watson is also being used in other hospitals, particularly the Mayo Clinic, to do cancer diagnostics. Why? Because these two systems, these big, smart, AI-enabled intelligent machine learning systems, are capable of reading all of the science and integrating it and applying it to images, diagnostic information, and patient histories to say this patient has this form of this cancer at this stage. In tests done independently at Moorfields on the eye diagnostics, 15 specialists from around the world were given the same information and asked to diagnose the particular eye disease a patient had. It took them an average of an hour and a half to get to a 75% agreement amongst these experts, and it took DeepMinds just 3 minutes to do the same work and was more reliable than the teams of doctors. So that's what innovation is. Those are some examples. Why does this matter? Well, there is, as you might not be surprised by now, a ranking of how innovative various economies around the world are. Canada ranks 17th out of 130 countries on the Global Innovation Index. In front of us are Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Ireland, the US, the UK, Singapore. So other countries are much more able to innovate, which means either do things smarter in terms of business processes or get products to market. What Canada is very good at is developing inventions. We're actually 6th in the world at that. So we have fantastic people coming up with ideas. Canada's awful at turning those ideas into commercial value. So there's a lot for us to do about translating ideas, inspirations, prototypes into commercial products that can get to market or into new sustainable business processes. Just another specific example, in addition to a general index of innovation, there's also a medical innovation index. And we're better slightly at that. We came 10th out of 50 economies in the world that are ranked for that. US, Germany, Japan, Switzerland, UK, Netherlands, Sweden, South Korea, France are all ahead of us. So, given that we have some very smart people doing some great work, but we're not good at commercializing it, what some observations can we make about why innovation is so problematic here? Now, I mentioned before, most innovation is adopt, adapt. We look at something in one place and say, we could use that over here. And that process, which we use all the time, we do it at home, when we're trying to solve a problem of plumbing and we can't get to a plumber, we'll find a fix using some bit of kit that we've got from our fishing tackle box or from some other kind of box. My dad used to have rows and rows of bottles with screws and tops and bits and pieces in them. And you say, what's all this for? He said, you never know. And we always find uses for lots of that stuff. So most innovation isn't a big invention, it's adopt adapt. In fact, only 5% of innovation is that big breakthrough idea. 95% is adopt adapt. And that means that most innovation is around continuous improvements. We don't take a business process, blow it up and start again. Very rarely do we do that. And when we do, we often make it a mistake first time round and we have to keep trying. So we tend to be cautious. This is not just true of Canada, but around the world. Now, if you remember the talk I gave about competitiveness, we have a problem about the absorption capacity of Canadian firms. And one of the reasons for that is most of them are very small. So our medium and large enterprises, and we only have 3,000 large enterprises, have a low tolerance for risk. And so unless you're willing to take a risk, you're not really going to innovate very quickly. Let me give you a concrete example. I used to be a management consultant. I'm all right now. When I was a management consultant, one of my clients was Blockbuster out of the US. And we were working with the leadership team there. And we said to them in 2000, we think you should buy Netflix. This is a little startup company mailing compact discs and DVDs through the mail system. And they don't charge late fees. You just get it in the mail, ship it back, but they're not really that bothered. And they said, oh, there's no future in that. I said, oh, no, but where they're going is they want to use the internet to distribute this stuff so you don't have to use the mail, you don't have to go to a store. And they told us, we got fired, they told us that will never catch on. You'll never see people downloading movies and watching them on a television. They want the experience of putting the thing in the DVD player. That's what they want. Really? Where's Blockbuster now? I can't remember seeing one recently. They weren't ready. They didn't have the absorption capacity as a big company to do the next thing. And many banks are in the same situation. We have massive innovation going on in fintech, in financial services, and banks are slow out of the gate to adopt some of the new technologies. Why is Scotiabank not using blockchain for international transactions for personal banking accounts? Most innovation that we see makes very modest gains in productivity, competitiveness, or performance. Some make big gains. But it's that willingness to calculate that risk and take it to get to a next level of performance rather than make a big leap that people are resisting. Risk is not part of our culture in a substantial way. It's much bigger in other parts of the world. So if you go to the Nordic countries and look at the speed at which a company will adopt a new technology and implement it and get it to work to produce even modest gains, they do so more often and faster and smarter than we do here. Now, part of the problem is it takes time for an innovation to have an impact. I mentioned in one of my previous videos that Amazon was founded at the same time Athabasca launched its MBA. Actually, we launched in the same week. One of the interesting things about Amazon, if you look at the number of products available to buy, didn't change very much for some time. In fact, they didn't significantly increase what you could buy. Remember, it began as an online bookstore that also sold CDs in 1994. It wasn't until 2005-06 that they ramped up how many products you could buy. And it's the significant ramping up of products and the idea of the long tail that we're going to have everything that you want in this category of cables or fans or electrical heaters or now food. You can buy all this stuff and we'll have everything. And we may only sell a small amount, but we're not keeping it in the warehouse. We're using a fantastic system for managing supply chains. That innovation took Amazon some time to get to. In fact, it took them over a decade. So you have to have patient capital, you have to have patient leadership, and you have to have courageous leadership to make innovation work and stick with it. So I'm going to end with some myths about innovation. One of them is that innovation comes from universities. I mean, we spend $1 billion a year at the University of Alberta. We spend $4 billion a year at the University of Toronto. That's where innovation comes from. And kind of almost does, but not quite. What comes from universities is invention. And I said at the beginning, invention is not the same as innovation. I can have a great idea and patent it, but I have to get it to market. And I have to do so with the support of people in marketing, people in management, people in human resources, people in supply chain management. I can't sit in this room here and invent the future and expect it to happen. Patents are nothing. They're by and large worthless. In fact, in a study I did for the government of Alberta, we showed that the average value of a patent was less than $10. It costs $58,000 to $65,000 to file for a patent, and you have to defend them, and defending one now costs about $2.5 million. I interviewed all the patent holders at the universities and other institutions here in Alberta and asked them how big their defence fund was, and then not one of them had a defence fund. They thought filing was sufficient protection. Wrong. So universities are really important places for creating the knowledge base, the highly qualified people that can enable innovation to happen, and creating the opportunity for innovation, but by and large they don't do the innovation piece. My friend and colleague Alan Cornford did a huge study many years ago that showed that for every dollar of public money spent in a university, you needed to spend $3 of private money in marketing and management and warehousing and supply chains to take that idea to market. So that's what we don't do here. Our ratio is closer to $1 of public money for every dollar of private money. In Finland, it's $3 of private money for every dollar of public money, which is one of the reasons they're way ahead of us. Second kind of myth that I've just kind of exposed is that you need intellectual property protection for innovation to really happen. You do in a couple of cases, particularly in drug developments and vaccines, but by and large, most sectors of the economy don't. The IT sector of the economy and the creative economies all don't do patents in that way. Their strategy is to be first to market. And I think that's an important understanding. Intellectual property is important. I'm an author, I have copyright protections, and I earn revenues from my copyrights. But it's not why I write. I'm much more interested in getting the ideas out there and finding routes to market. Another myth is innovation can take a heck of a long time, and for some things it does. But just look at the speed we got these COVID-19 drugs. We changed all our mindsets to say there's got to be a faster way of doing this. And another example I would have, many years ago when I was still a management consultant, I'm okay now. Many years ago when I was still a management consultant, I worked for Hewlett-Packard. And HP I worked for their printer division, which makes all these wonderful inkjet printers and so on. It used to take 2.5 years for a new printer to get from idea to the market. And the then CEO of Hewlett-Packard, as she said, what we need to do is to get that down to 6 months. And so better products in half the time became a mantra within HP. And another number of other organizations like Local Motors, who 3D print vehicles of various kinds, cars, buses, submarines. They used to take 6 months to print, to prototype and then print the first version of a car. It now takes them days, not weeks or months. We can do things a lot smarter, faster, if as at the same time we're looking at the product, We're also looking at the business processes that go with them and the supply chain management and supports. And the last myth, and I'll end on this, is that only a few people can innovate. Not true. We can all innovate. We all use, I'm sitting in front of a computer, which is why I'm pointing pointlessly over here. We all use Microsoft products. But a wonderful study some years ago by Deloitte showed that most of us only know how to use about 25% of what these products can do. And by training, we can make a lot more use of these products. I'll give you a real example from my consulting background. One of my clients was Oracle, and I worked for Oracle's own internal finance division, who collected the money from customers, sent the money out to suppliers, managed the finances of the corporation. They asked us to come in and say, how can we do this better, smarter? 3 things we noticed. The first was nobody inside the company was using Oracle's own financial service products. Oracle Finance, for example, terrific product. They were all using Microsoft Excel, and most of them were using it badly. Secondly, we saw that because they were not efficient in using their own software, it meant they have to have financial accountants in every country in the world, managing local supply chains, paying customers, receiving money from customers, paying suppliers, filing taxes, filing their reporting documents to the revenue agencies and the tax authorities and so on. And we pointed out that actually, if you spent some money and trained everybody on using your own products, you could consolidate all of this accounting activity into a single location. So we were working for Oracle Middle East, Europe, and Africa. Just imagine how many countries that is. There are over 50 countries in Africa, 27 countries in the EU, plus Britain, plus all the Nordic countries. So accountants everywhere. We had 1,800 accountants inside just that part of Oracle. We got that number down to 400. We placed them all in Dublin because it had the lowest tax regime in the whole of that Middle East, Europe, and Africa grouping. And they managed accounts receivable, accounts payable, and taxes from that single location with less than 420 staff. Big change. All done because we trained people in using Oracle's own products. And we consolidated thinking about what the work was. The other thing that happened there in this little story is that we got to use Oracle's own financial operations as a showcase for Oracle products. It's possible, according to the team I worked with, that the impact of having that system on sales of their own products was over $1 billion a year. So not only did we save over $250 million, we made another $1 billion in sales just by thinking differently. I'm no accountant. I'm a psychologist, but I can see and think and look and learn. A lot of innovation isn't rocket surgery, as Ronald Reagan would say. It's very simple. It's about imagining how we could do the same work completely differently, smarter, better, faster. Thanks for watching.